It's 8:45pm on Wednesday the 15th of March 2017 and this is the AskTCW podcast live. Hello and welcome to tonight's AskTCW podcast, a lovely eclectic mix of questions coming up that you've been sending to us over the past couple of days. I'm delighted to welcome, to answer some of those questions, Adam Reddish.
Good evening, everybody.
Antoine Marie-Jeanne.
Hello and happy Pat Gallivan Day.
And Andy Haywood.
Evening.
We're going to crack straight on, but if you do want to get in touch with us throughout the show, please do via Twitter. It's at CatsWhiskersTV. Use the hashtag AskTCW if you want to respond to anything that we talk about tonight, or indeed if you've got a question that you'd like to send in to us, and hopefully we will have a time to answer it at the end of the show. However, we have got quite a few questions to get through, and this one is one that we held back from last week's show. It's from Black Panther 2011 on the Cage Forum, and he says, do you think that it's about time the Elite League should look into giving linesmen more powers to call penalties and goals as such? Doing this, in my opinion, would be something new and beneficial for the game, especially when there's face-offs. And he puts in brackets referring to the Farmer incident with David Rutherford from a couple of weeks ago. Ant, you mentioned that you quite like this question, so we'll let you start.
Yeah, well, if we're not going to go with a four-man officiating system, then surely this is the next best thing. The only reservation I have about it is the experience of the majority of the linesmen. I know you've got a couple that are quite experienced that could probably do the job, but I'm under the impression that quite a lot of them are quite young and inexperienced and what have you. So do you want to be putting that sort of pressure on them? The easiest answer for me is to go with the four-man officiating system, as we've banged on about God knows how many times. But if they want to save money and go with just three officials, then I don't see why they can't do this. I mean, for me, they're just literally there to stand on a line and put their arm up if it's an offside at the moment. So they might as well do something else.
Okay. Andy, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of against it, to be brutally honest. The four-man system would be ideal, but currently it's only a three-man system. I think it's odd that he mentions the Farmer Rutherford situation, because let's face it, he got exactly what he deserved in that scenario. It's not like he got away with it, and because the ref missed it, he got his 5+ match and his suspension off the back of it.
Could it be more though the fact that Rutherford did aim that little tap on Farmer's ankle that would probably been missed by the ref because he was dropping the puck for the puck drop?
Well, yeah, it probably is, to be fair. I never thought of that, to be really honest, so I apologise in that case if that is what Black Panther meant. But no matter how many refs or linesmen you've got on the ice, you're always going to miss something. They're not going to get every single infraction correct every single time, and ultimately, as much as the very simplistic view is obviously what Ant said, I think he's done him a bit of a disservice by saying that they just put their hand up for an offside at the moment. At the end of the day, it's a role that the linesmen have, that they follow, the same roles that every other linesman in every other league has. They are allowed to confer with a referee if they've seen something that warrants, is it misconduct penalties, I believe?
Yeah, any major penalties, I believe, that they can.
Yeah, so obviously they do have those sort of powers, but obviously the one thing I do wish that they would call more, because I believe they do have the power to call it, is the face-off infractions. Now, you'll see them chuck a player out for a face-off violation, but I don't know if it's the ref or the linesman themselves that can actually call the penalty if it continues at the same face-off. Now, granted, it doesn't happen very often, but there are a few times where a player will be chucked out of the face-off circle and someone will come in and they'll do exactly the same thing as the person that's been chucked out for, and they obviously won't get chucked out because they can't this time, but obviously realistically there should be a penalty on the play because it's technically delay of the game. The one thing that they do obviously also have to do is the icing thing. This isn't their fault, but I just think the whole not changing after a face-off has kind of become pointless now because there's that many ways to get away with it. Whether you actually change, whether you actually make a line change or get a break, or if you just go over to the bench because you say that you've broken your stick, but then you have a look at a couple of sticks and take exactly the same one back. Farmer did it against Belfast before he got chucked out. I think it was Belfast, but I certainly remember him doing it recently. And there are other ways and means of getting that extra break. Obviously, they'll chuck a player who's never taken a face-off in his life into the face-off circle just to get chucked out. It's things like that I appreciate that every team does it and everybody gets away with it, but it just kind of defeats the object of actually having that rule in place. So might as well just get rid of it.
Adam, do you have anything to add to that?
Not a great deal, to be honest. I mean, obviously the speed of the game has got so much quicker, I think, having watched the game for many, many, many years. And, I think it's putting the three-man officiating system under great strain. I don't think we're going to get a four-man system anytime soon. Obviously, we've had a few false dawns. We thought we were getting it, and then it never happened. So, I mean, what I would say is, from the point of the speed of the game, if we were to give a few more powers to linesmen to call things that might be off the play, as it were, then I'd generally be for that. But that would be a huge, I think, culture change and real shift in how officiating of ice hockey games happens, on a global basis almost, because I just don't think that there is probably any sort of comparable thing to benchmark that against in the global ice hockey sport. So interesting one. And just to pick up on something that Ant said, there are quite a few inexperienced linesmen operating in the Elite League, but there's also quite a few very experienced ones too. I mean, I remember Paul Staniforth. He was a regular ISL referee, a few years ago. So, he's vastly experienced, and I dare say there's probably two or three, other linesmen that are doing the rounds at the moment that have refereed, in the top league over the years. So it's a bit of a mixture, I guess, with the experience of those linesmen that you might want to try and empower with, more sort of ability to call things that the main referee can't see.
Okay. Right. Well, thank you very much for your question, Black Panther, and quite some discussion there. But I think, as we've said many times, we all pretty much like the four-man official system. However, we shall see if that happens. Next question comes from Graham Thompson, Clantastic. You may know him from the Purple Army podcast. And he says, it looks like there will be 2 conferences of 6 next season. Is there an appetite from fans to separate Panthers and Steelers?
Yes.
And, yeah. I think there's going to be a big yes around here. But, Andy, you spoke up, so we'll let you start.
Yeah, it would be so good. I just think this season and a few seasons in the past, we've had them in the Challenge Cup over 2 legs. We've ended up with them in the playoffs over 2 legs, and it works out obviously with them being in the same, with us being in the same Challenge Cup group as well. I think this season we'll have played them 14 times.
If we do get them in the quarterfinals of the playoffs, it will be 14 times, which is, I think, I worked it out. If you take out the Continental Cup games that we played, it will be over 20% of the domestic games we played against just one team.
Yeah, and as much as obviously the club will love the paydays, and obviously that goes both ways. Both clubs will love the paydays, and yes. The atmosphere is usually better because it's Sheffield, and yes, there's it's a Sheffield game and that type of thing. But I just think I'm sick of it. if I'm honest. And that's not necessarily, anyone's fault as such. It's how the things worked, and obviously it you don't necessarily know that you're going to get them in the Challenge Cup semi-final, or you can get them in the playoff quarterfinals, but there's a fair chance. And I just think 14 times in a year is just far too much. And a lot of people talk about the fact that the rivalry goes stale. Well, you know what? Maybe if we don't play them as often, it will come back to what it perhaps once was. I'm not for any minute suggesting that, all of a sudden next year, if we are separated, that we're going to get the whole blood and guts and glory sort of games like we had in the past. It'll take a bit of time, I'm sure, but I just think that from my own personal standpoint, we're playing them far too often, and I can't imagine that even the people who are making the money off the back of it, and the people who are happy with all the big crowds and the big paydays, I can't really honestly say that they must enjoy it, because they must get bored of it, surely. The fact that it's another Sheffield game, the fact that, I appreciate that they probably don't get bored of not having to sell the game, as it were, because it's pretty self-selling, but surely, the players must get bored of it, the coaches must get bored of it, that sort of thing. And I just think that if there is a possibility that we can change this and change it for the better, for me, it should be done immediately.
I would entirely agree with that, because I think it's not an event anymore, playing Sheffield. And obviously I go back quite a long way, but when Sheffield first came into the league, when it was the old British Premier Division, you played them twice at home, twice away, and home and away in the Benson Hedges Cup, and then if you got them again in the cup competitions. But it was 6 times a season, and they were events. Okay, we was at the old Ice Stadium, but it tickets were like gold dust. And Sheffield Arena, I've been to Sheffield Arena for the Boxing Day game, where there was 10,000 people there, and they had extra seating at the stage end to fit everybody in. They were events back then, and I don't think they're events anymore because they happen just too frequently. So I agree. I think they should be split up, and I think it'll help with the balance of the conferences as well, especially if Steelers and Belfast join the Gardner, and then you've got Manchester, Guildford, MK coming into the Erdhart. I think you're going to have 2 very balanced conferences. I mean, Ant, is that something you agree with?
I agree that, yes, it would balance the conferences out a bit more. But for me, the big thing about the conferences next season is what they do with the Challenge Cup. I think the reason why we've played Sheffield so much is purely down to, obviously, the knockout stages and what have you. And obviously, with 2 conferences of 6 next season, that means 3 home, 3 away versus your own conference anyway. So that's automatically 2 less games than you've got against that lot currently. I'm like you. I'm bored. I can't get up for these games anymore. I can't be bothered with them. I haven't been to Sheffield in God knows how long because I just have no interest in it whatsoever. It's the same old rubbish week in, week out. And 9 times out of 10 over the last few games, they've given us an absolute pumping as well, which is, you don't want to see that as a Panthers fan. But for me, they need to look at what they're doing with the Challenge Cup next season. And that would play a big part into whether I'd like to see Sheffield go to the other conference or not. I think if they do something different with it, whether it be a completely random draw or straight knockout into like the final group stage, I don't know. But I know we've touched on it before about the Panthers doubling up games as well. The only 2 games that don't get doubled up when it's been the Challenge Cup groups have been Coventry and Sheffield. Maybe you if we have to double up games, which this will never happen because it's the biggest seller in UK hockey, but if you have to double up games, you double up those, and then we get standalone games against Cardiff and Manchester. I don't know. I can't see it happening. I mean, we're heading towards yet another sellout for a completely pointless game on Friday. that is nothing but pride. Yet there's less than 50 seats left. I mean, it still draws the fans, whether the regulars like us enjoy it or not. It's still the biggest draw when it comes to those that only go out for a night out and what have you. I'd like to see it less. Can't see it happening.
Adam, is the business case too strong that it won't be changed?
Well, money talks, doesn't it? And I think Andy and Ant have put some very, very strong arguments forward about why fewer games against Sheffield will probably be a benefit to both sides in the long term. Yeah, money will talk, and ultimately, both sides need to stay solvent. And obviously, they're very good revenue raisers because, we certainly always fill out the NIC, and Sheffield probably get their biggest crowds of the season against us. But just to echo what they both said, it's such a stale rivalry, which is bizarre given that we've got the ability to keep selling the NIC out time and time again. I just, like Ant said, don't get excited or enthused about Sheffield coming to town one iota anymore. If anything, I look to those games on the fixture list and I can't be bothered. And I've actually noticed over the years, I don't think the crowd gets up nearly as much as they used to for Sheffield games, and that's probably just because we've had overkill in terms of fixtures. Now, how can we get around that? Well, Ant suggested a few things to do with the structure of the Challenge Cup, and how the qualifying rounds, are structured. I'm a bit of a traditionalist. I would love to go back, and this might, be one of the answers to a later question, but I would love to go back to the old B&H style qualification rounds, where you had, say, 2 Elite League teams in a group, and you've got 2 EPL teams in a group. I actually think that would help start to, build some bridges with, the English Premier League and Tier 2 of ice hockey in this country. I know that's kind of getting off the point a little bit, but, I'm just anything that results in fewer games against Sheffield as part of the regular league season, is totally all right by me.
Okay. Well, we shall move on to the next question, and that comes from Richard Sisson, but thank you to Graham for your question. So Richard asks, with the Belfast Dat Sulk, and that is how it's written, so please don't complain to us, with the Belfast Dat Sulk using his stick again as a weapon, is there more stick infractions now that enforcers are almost extinct? Andy, I think you will probably have a view on this.
Yeah, I think there probably is. Don't get me wrong. There was still stick infractions, when there was enforcers, and you think back to some of the big ones. Martin McSorley and Donald Brashear. You don't get you don't get much more enforcer than those two, and that's a pretty big nasty stick play. But yeah, I think we are. My thing with it is it's not necessarily the lack of enforcers that does it. It's the instigator rule, in the sense that it gives these people something to hide behind, because they know that they don't have to sort of be held accountable for their actions. So you do get some of these dirty plays, whether that be a spearing by Datsuk or Farmer's cross check. You see these sort of things, not commonplace, but they happen often enough that there should be some sort of punishment, and usually they're the sort of plays that go on behind the ref and the linesman's back, because the players know what they're doing. They're not stupid. And invariably they target areas where there's no padding, there's no protection, again, because they're not stupid. And I think back to one of the dirtiest ones I've seen, so probably after Farmers, but in sort of recent years, was David Ling on one of the Glebe brothers in Nottingham against Coventry, where the game was won. There was like 2 minutes left on the clock, and he skated behind whichever Glebe brother it was. I excuse me for not knowing which one it was, and he took the biggest axe swing at the back of his knees, and he dropped to the floor in agony. and Linger skated off, and Ben Olsen skated over to David Ling, and what can Ben Olsen do? He's in a lose-lose situation. He either starts dropping the gloves and punishing him for him, and he gets ridiculed for being so big and a tough guy and fighting someone like David Ling, or David Ling gets away with it. And it's that I have an issue with, rather than not necessarily the enforcers, but it's that whole sort of not being able to be held accountable because you can hide behind an instigator rule, so you don't have to fight. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, and I appreciate the reasons why they brought it in, but it has created another monster, and it's created these players that can get away with things because they know that if someone takes exception to it and comes after them, they can just hide behind that rule, and you're looking at 17 minutes in the box potentially, and even if you don't fight, you're looking at perhaps a misconduct or getting some sort of power play penalty kill out of it for your own team. So it's that sort of concerns me regarding the stick play is more the fact that they aren't held accountable for.
A question related to the same incident comes from a Ginler on the Cage Forum. He says, is it right that teams can alter the course of potential player bans? Seems like Higgins and Lawrence both got away scot-free last weekend after a spear and a blatant two-handed slash, when other players are getting punished for similar or even accidental plays. This looks like an obvious case of we won't if you don't. Should the clubs be able to police these offences themselves just because it suits them both to keep quiet? Adam?
No, not at all. I think I've spoken about this on a previous episode of Ask TCW. I actually think that discipline should be totally taken out of the hands of the clubs themselves because of that very reason. Somebody independent or a team of independent people ought to look at every single game, regardless of the incidents that happened in it. Some games nothing might happen, but other games, there might be a whole range of different offences that take place. And I just think it's too convenient, as the question is asked, for clubs that have sort of mutual interest, as it were, to be able to sort of make a gentleman's agreement, if you want to call it that, away from the sphere of DOPS, and not offer up the player on the opposing team for any sort of subsequent review. I think that makes a mockery of discipline in the Elite League. I really do. And, the sooner that I think DOPS is professionalised, the better. Because, there'll be winners and losers from the way that things are currently arranged at the moment. And I don't like that. I want a level playing field right across the Elite League. Because, at the moment, some teams are benefiting from that. Other teams aren't so benefiting as much. So, yeah, let's get it as independent as we possibly can, although it comes back to the old chestnut of cost again and available resources and finances, because I don't know how you'd be able to finance that sort of structure or system at the moment.
And anything to add on either Richard's or Ginland's questions?
Not really. I think Adam summed it up perfectly.
Okay. We shall move on then, and we got a couple of questions that were sent in to us via Facebook from Tony DeMarco. He says, on the first one, I watch a lot of EPL hockey and would argue that there are a number of British players in that league or playing abroad who would be good enough to play at Elite League level and even improve on what is already there. The problem is that Elite League fans and most importantly coaches are unaware of this talent. Should the Elite League and Ice Hockey UK put on a couple of showcase games and ensure that all Elite League coaches attend for all those Brits and some of the EPL imports who want to earn an Elite League contract and show what they can do?
It's a really good idea. That I love the idea, even if it's a behind closed doors thingy, almost like an open trial type thing. But obviously, if the players want to do it, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
If they've got established contracts at leagues that are better than ours, then why would you come and plod in the Elite League and what have you? And some of the EPL Brits are no doubt on a better wage than they would get in the Elite League too.
Well, not only that, because they're part time, they generally have other jobs as well outside of hockey.
I think it'd be interesting. I think it's definitely got a lot of merit to it, and obviously you will have those players out there that want to make a go of it. They want to play Elite League hockey. obviously they'd be the ones that'd be more keen on this, maybe catch an eye and what have you. I like the idea, and it's, when funding comes down to it and everything, ideal case we'd all love scouts at each teams and what have you. But obviously this would be a much cheaper way of you'd literally just pay in for the players to fly over. All the players fly over them off their own back. It comes down to money again. But no, I really like the idea. A really good idea, to be honest.
Okay. On his second question, he says, on the question of who could be an independent chairman of the Elite League, would the ideal candidate not be Richard Grieveson, who has been elected chair of Ice Hockey UK, the body with whom the Elite League is affiliated to? Adam?
Yeah, possibly. He seems to tick all the boxes and has the right sort of credentials to fulfil that sort of role. We need a unifier, don't we? And it looks like things are starting to unify down at Tier 2 level of ice hockey in this country. But I think ice hockey will never really go forward sizably until Tier 2 becomes better integrated with Tier 1. Now, I'm not suggesting that you get relegation and promotion from whatever Tier 2 ends up looking like, but we need somebody with a strong personality, because as we've discussed on many times before, there are some very strong personalities around the Elite League table, and I dare say that there are some equally strong characters around the tables of the EPL League and maybe even the Scottish National League and the English division structure. So we just need somebody that is independent first and foremost, that doesn't have any sort of vested interest, and can almost get people that might not have seen eye to eye in the past to see the common good for ice hockey going forwards. Now, that might be being a bit too idealist, but it's certainly something that needs to be tried, because ice hockey in this country is too small to be, totally ruled by factions and different groups of clubs, pulling in different directions. We all need to sort of unite under one sort of common purpose. And from what I've read of this guy, he seems to be a very good character, and I wish him the best of luck in trying to unify all of the parties together, hopefully for the betterment of British ice hockey in the long run.
Well, I'm hoping to get an interview with Richard Grieveson in the near future, so watch this space, and we will put that out as a special podcast if and when it happens. Andy, anything to add to either of Tony's questions?
Could you please refresh my memory of the first one?
Yeah, so he watches a lot of EPL hockey.
Oh, yeah. The EPL thing. I suppose, because I did have something when Ant was talking. I'd got something in my head but forgot what it was. I suppose, in a way, the closest thing to sort of assimilate that to would be like the prospects game in the NHL, where the top... Is it like the top 40 prospects or whatever get split into two teams? They play each other, all the scouts are there, some of the coaching staff are there, and they make the notes, and then obviously it forms part of their selection process for the draft. Now, I don't think we could ever get down to something like that, because ultimately these guys that are in the EPL that are of a standard probably aren't, I think you'd be doing them a disservice to call them prospects. Because some of them will already be fully fledged hockey players. But I do like the idea, but I think I think the only way it would ever work, and I don't think it ever would work, but I think the only way that it could possibly work would be to have sort of only the players that were interested in making the step up playing in it. As it were. So you would have almost like a trial type thing where, but I think the problem with that is it gets very political, in the sense of you might have a player who is in talks for a new contract, but all of a sudden he decides he wants to play in the Elite League, and all of a sudden things turn sour between the club that he's currently at, because they want him to stay there. There's a lot of things in it that realistically could turn sour. I think the only way realistically in this country that we could do it is just to make hockey that much more accessible. But unfortunately, because of the sport and because of the way things are, invariably the games are on at the same time in both leagues. So you're not going to be able to get coaches go to many games or any games because they're either too busy with their own clubs or they have a match on at the very same time. It would be nice to see a few more come through, and obviously it increases competition and stuff, but I think currently at the moment there is far too much red tape that needs to be sort of broken before we can even think about the potential ideas regarding that kind of thing.
Can I just jump in, Jono, for a second? I mean, the guy that's asked the question, obviously does see a lot more EPL hockey than I do, which admittedly is pretty much next to nothing. But, looking at the top point scorer table in the EPL, just to put it into context for, the quality and depth of talent, you've got Danny Miser, I think he's the fourth highest British point scorer in that league. And,
wow.
Other names there as well. The other Brits, have either all had elite league experience or, have started off their careers in the elite league and just drifted away from top level ice hockey in the country. So the issue is, how can we get these young Brits that want to aspire to better things through to the elite league? I mean, you look at Betteridge, look at Ollie Betteridge here. He was at Swindon, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And put up a fairly solid season down in the EPL with Swindon Wildcats. And it took him a hell of a long time, before he started to get reasonable amounts of ice time for the Panthers. So, okay, the Panthers might have a better sort of quality of Brit than some of the teams at the bottom of the elite league. But it just shows you the difficulty of, an individual coach, of an elite league team. They might have a very sort of specific ethos about what their teams and what their rosters need to do. And, they might not necessarily want to take a risk or chance with, blooding some young British hockey players into the roster, especially, when, you might only ever be about 3 games away from the sack. So it's all a case of balance, really. I think we definitely need more Brits in the elite league, or certainly a refresher Brits, because the Brits that we've had at the top of the elite league for Sheffield, for Panthers, for Cardiff, they've all been around a long time now, and some of them are coming probably to the end of their, how can you put it, shelf life. So where are the next generation of Brits? That's definitely something that the elite league teams need to think about, and individual coaches need to think about as well.
I think it goes deeper than that as well. I think the next generation of Brits goes right down to junior level, because let's face it, that's where they start off, and I think it's spotting the potential early. I mean, I've already mentioned I saw the under-16s in Dumfries in between Christmas and New Year, and I do honestly believe if that group of players can stay together, I think in sort of 6, 7, 8 years' time, we will have a very, very exciting national team. But we shall see. We shall see. We've got another couple of questions along similar lines, actually, from Bradure Fan 1993. That's come from the Cage Forum. His first one is, although mentioned in previous episodes, what do people feel would be the best outcome for the second tier? As I understand it, a major problem within UK hockey was the lack of collaboration or communication between different bodies. However, this week there seems to have been better progress based on Richard Grieveson's statement between Ice Hockey UK and the English Ice Hockey Association et al. In terms of working cohesively. Given this, what is the optimum outcome moving forward? Does anybody want to have a stab at that one?
Well, it needs to be a development league, I think. Given what we were just talking about in the last question, we need to have a clear pathway through from tier 2 to the top tier, which is elite league hockey.
Well, sorry to interrupt you, Adam, but even I think tier 3 and 4.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I
was
only focusing on that because that's what the question asked. But I totally agree with you, Jono, that tiers 3 and 4 have got massive roles and parts to play in preparing players that are ready for 5, 6, 7 years time, to slip into elite league rosters. So yeah, I think tier 2 downwards, then there certainly needs to be a realisation that the work that they're doing, the great work that goes on at grassroots ice hockey. Can you say that, grassroots ice hockey? Not seen many grassed ice hockey rinks. Anyway, down at the bottom of the sport, there needs to be a realisation that their work is not going to be wasted because the player's going to be hitting a glass ceiling when they get to 17, 18 because they can't get a contract at an EPL club, and they certainly won't get a contract at an elite league club. So I don't know how best that can be rectified and solved, but there does need to be a clear way through, for any young British player that's got talent to get to the top echelons of the sport in this country.
And Andy, there's already been proposals for a new Premier Ice Hockey League with 7 teams signed up to it at the moment, and a drop in imports from 5, which in the current EPL, down to 3. Do you think this is the way forward?
Well, I think time will tell. Ultimately, I think it's difficult to sort of judge at the moment, especially with my sort of CV regarding this kind of issue, where I don't have a lot, or if any, sometimes knowledge of the EPL or the Premier League or whatever it will be called. I do think, though, that with the rumblings of some of the financial difficulties that teams have had, and obviously, with Manchester going, and obviously Guildford and Milton Keynes making the step up, there has to be almost like a complete reset, and whether that means going back down to 3 imports rather than 5, and trying to get a level playing field so that everyone's on the same page and is sort of progressing at a similar rate. Yes, some teams have always developed more or quickly or slowly because of finance or facilities or players or training coaches, that sort of thing. But it's sort of trying to make sure that it's sustainable is the key. As a Panthers fan that's been around a little while, I remember the days of a 5-team elite ISL. I was young enough to not really get affected by it, but I imagine that there would have been times where you sort of thought there might not be a league next year because teams were dropping out left, right, and centre, and no matter what level it's at, whether it's the NHL or under fives, you need teams ultimately, and there needs to be some sort of parity between the teams, and I think that realistically, like I say, if it means almost hitting the reset button and starting from scratch, then that's only got to be a good thing for the long run. Yes, it might be a bit of a downer, of short term, but realistically, for the long term success of a league like that, there needs to be some sort of reset.
Bradurfan's second question, he says it's connected to his first. He says, in relation to the Elite League, where do people genuinely see the future governance leading? The problems posed by a lack of independence are well documented. My concerns lie more with the lack of basic business acumen. The league has no sponsors and seem to think it can be turning down TV deals, we can only assume, for more money. The EIHA has managed to get junior hockey onto Premier Sports, which is exactly what the game needs. With sponsorship, you have to prove you are worth the money. This means taking what is offered to get initial deals in place and working hard on relationships to show that when contract renewals come round, you can justify increasing your demands. We are a small sport, and that means showing you can tread water before you jump off the diving board. In a league that has no independent governance, no growth-orientated marketing approach, and no discipline over its own board, what hope is there for genuine sustainable growth and reaching a point where we aren't constantly worried about financial security of those down near the bottom of the table? Quite a meaty statement there. Ant, you have a go at that one?
Oh, you git. where do you start? I think he latches onto, well, he or she latches onto a couple of good points there to do with, turning down the TV deal. That's proven to be a massive backward step with what they've replaced it with. But the Elite League keep banging on about how they've had this advert out for a commercial director for 2 years now, and they've not got the right person in. Blah blah blah. I think that we've talked about it again and again, and it'll continue to come along. I think until there's some figureheads, and I use that plural on purpose, that are independent from all the teams that are running the Elite League. It's always going to struggle. It's always going to be a sort of an old boys club, if you like. That's certainly the impression I get from the outside looking in. When you've not got that sort of person who's devoting their career to putting out these, trying to get sponsorship deals, trying to get TV deals, etc., etc. I don't think we are going to qualify. Get any further. I mean, the one thing I did sort of snigger about slightly was the we are a small sport. I mean, in terms of television coverage, yes, massively. We are, ice hockey in the UK is non-existent. But I think I saw something. I can't remember where I read it, but we actually get more people watching our sport. I think it's the fourth most watched sport in the UK. Fourth most watched
sport in the UK, the biggest indoor sport.
And that's only just behind cricket, and I'm assuming that comes from the 2020, because it's the 2020 games that only ever sell out, with the local ones and what have you. So, I mean, that shows that there is a massive appetite for this sport in this country, but until the finances are made, and that's again, it all comes down to the money thing. It's sort of a catch-22 situation. You don't get the sponsorship in, so you can't afford to pay a commercial director. But if you don't have a commercial director, you've got nobody out there going to get sponsorship deals. So it's like chicken and egg. What goes first? I'm sorry to blather on, and I can't really answer the question. I'm not that smart, unfortunately.
I think the crux of it is we need some independence. We need some professionalism at that level. And when you see that there's a big programme of junior hockey coming on Premier Sports throughout the summer, from conference finals to England and Scotland game, junior finals, women's finals, and they're all going to be on Premier Sports, which is, as we all know, the home for hockey in the United Kingdom when it comes to coverage. And yet the Elite League didn't take a deal, and I just think it's absolutely crazy. Well, we shall see what happens over the next couple of months. And a completely different question we're going to move on to now. It comes from Anthony Russell, who, of course, the host of the Banners on the Wall podcast. He's a big Basingstoke fan. If you want to listen to the last episode of Banners on the Wall, he has a great interview with Rob Scott about the Nottingham Panthers Supporters Trust, so it is well worth a listen. But Anthony asks us all, if you are getting delusioned with the Panthers, which other hockey team in Britain do you go to watch and why? Andy?
None. To be brutally honest, I know I will probably be in the minority, but I'm not disillusioned with the Panthers. They're still the team I support. They're still the team I love. Yes, the league position is as good as I'd like it to be, but it is what it is. There are other teams trying to win every game that we compete in. Should we be better? Yes, we probably should, but for me, none. There's not another club in the league that I would do.
Okay, Adam.
Yeah, similar to Andy. I wouldn't ever think about watching another British ice hockey club. My loyalties are exclusively with the Panthers, and whilst there have been frustrations, and obviously this season hasn't gone nearly as well as I would have expected it to or hoped for in the league, it's still not been bad enough to have me sort of give up on the Panthers and go and seek my other ice hockey watching experience from a different team in the league, be it the Elite League or the EPL. So no, it's Panthers or nothing for me. That's my answer to Anthony's question.
Okay, and Ant?
I've been to watch the Hull Pirates a couple of times. I couldn't do that all the time. It's a bit of a journey anyway, but it'll take the shine off it, because I used to enjoy going to Hull as a Panthers fan, and that's why I've kind of gone back. If Hull had a team in the Elite League, then I wouldn't be spending my time, seeing how they're getting on and what have you. Like as much as we talk about how we're frustrated with how things are going, and Paul's article this week was excellent. Basically deciding I really don't want to renew my season ticket because I'm fed up, but I probably will because it's in my blood. It's the club become part of you, and as much as I'd like to be able to turn around and say, you know what, I don't care anymore. You've mugged me off enough, or you just don't seem, the team don't seem to be bothered. Blah blah blah. I can't do it because I love going to watch the Panthers. The Panthers are my team. And I think that's why it hurts so much when they're not doing so well, is because you really want them to do well. Similar to any other sport. I mean, I'm obviously a big Man United fan. I couldn't find myself going to watch anybody else. I've been to watch Notts because they were a local team, and I like watching football. Well, that's whether you can watch football at Notts County. Adam, I'll leave that to you.
Low blow.
But yeah, it's something that would be really, really hard. I mean, you just have to look at the experience those fans have had that have lost their teams. The devastation that it has caused to the fans, to the community, and what have you. I couldn't bring myself going to it. I think I'd probably give up on hockey if something happened to the Panthers, to be honest.
I'm exactly the same. The Panthers are my team. They're in my blood. I wouldn't walk away and go and watch another team. I suppose I'm lucky that in my job I do get to see a lot of hockey anyway, and cover a lot of hockey throughout Britain and Europe. So I'm lucky in that way. However, I sort of thought about the question and thought, well, what would I do if Panthers folded? And the answer is probably get a season ticket in the away block at Sheffield Arena. So, so there you go. I love the game too much to walk away, I think, but I love the Panthers too much to walk away from them as well. And that's probably part of the problem. But that probably leads us on nicely to the next question. So thank you, Anthony, for that. The next question comes from Colin Basford. He says, I have to ask, does this club really take us seriously, or do they just not think at all? No sooner than a pathetic performance at the weekend and season tickets for next season advert is announced pretty much straight away. This is not the first time they've done this either. At least let the wounds heal first. I know it is a business, but for me this is so much like saying get over it and get your money out. Adam, you can crack on with that.
Oh wow, that's an interesting observation by Colin. I do agree with him to a point. Sometimes with Panthers media output, I do wonder whether anybody just steps away and thinks for a minute or two about the timing and the content of things that they do tweet and put onto Facebook as well. I see what Colin's saying with regards to the timing of the news about next year's season tickets, but they probably were always planning to put that sort of message out at that time. So it's not often I defend the club, but I think on this occasion, if they were always planning to release that sort of news early this week, then would anyone have said, oh, hang on a second, let's wait a few days because of the calamity over in Belfast over the weekend? Fans' feelings are quite raw and everything's still quite emotional. Let's just let things lie down for a few days and let the dust settle. I don't know. I think that's Panthers' biggest weakness, is that they don't really seem to understand or have any sort of idea about the gauging the mood of the fan base as a whole. I think until they sort of refine their skills at understanding what the fans are feeling a bit more, there's going to be these instances where, tweets and Facebook posts are going to be put out there, and people, like Colin and others, I'm sure will think, hang on, that's just, very, very insensitive. And, do they really want our support, or do they just want the notes out of our wallet? So, yeah, I do agree with Colin on that. And maybe it's just something for the Panthers to take note of, that, come on, guys, just think about how things look from the fans' point of view once in a while, and just make adjustments accordingly. Really.
Can I come here? I actually think that what they do in this regard is absolutely bang on. I think a lot of people want to know, especially with the thing is, I appreciate what you're saying, but the thing with the season ticket is they're not bloody cheap. And the sooner people can get this information and start planning on when things need to be paid by, when they need to get this money all sort of collated and together and things like that, people generally want to know as soon as possible. I know that there was a few rumblings regarding, and it's kind of the same every year because it's going to fall in January, but the fact that out of the blue, it's playoff tickets go on sale next week, and all of a sudden people are saying, "Oh, blimey, I've got to scramble and get all the cash ready and and stuff like that." So I do think that whilst I appreciate what you're saying, I just think that things like this, that in the end of the season, you're gonna get information about your season ticket for next year. Unfortunately, you can't guarantee a result. And, yes, by all accounts, we didn't play very well while we were in Belfast. But, I know they put that tweet out and it was quite optimistic on quite a few people's parts. But did anyone actually think we were going to get any points this weekend? Because I didn't. And whilst that doesn't necessarily excuse the way we played, at the end of the day, the result was kind of as I expected. So with regards... them putting out asking for season ticket money really doesn't have an issue with me whatsoever.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you on that completely. I think the sooner they get the news out about the season tickets, like you say, the better and easier the fans have got more time to prepare and sort out how they're paying for things. And don't forget, this season as well, we've had the addition of 2 new teams. Now, we knew Milton Keynes were coming in. We didn't know about Guildford. Well, we weren't told about Guildford until, a few months ago. So they've got to sort out the conferences, how many times each team's playing, how many games this season ticket's going to cover and what have you. So I don't think that putting the news out when they did is probably it was any bearing to do with the results at all. If anything, it's probably doing the age-old thing of let's try and get those news items off that front page as quickly as possible about how terrible we were in Belfast. And on the flip side, they've tried to emphasise that they do foresee more Saturday games next season. We've not, we didn't have a great amount of Saturday games. People prefer the Saturday games in general. So I think, it's a case of partly get the news out, mostly get the news out as soon as they've now come to terms with what games they're doing. And secondly, I think maybe a little bit part of let's try and focus on the positives, whatever positives we've got left.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that the price is staying the same, but obviously I need to know if I can get the money together, which isn't always easy. Next question comes from Lee Constable. He says, this is just a rumour I've heard bouncing around the last few days about Sheffield Arena to close in 3 years because of cutbacks. What do you make of it? Will it have any implications for the Steelers? Now, we had something on our WhatsApp group, which was a posting from a Sheffield forum that Paul posted. and it's something that appeared on the Sheffield forum, not the Steel Talk. This is just a Sheffield forum, under the title "Sheffield Arena to Close." And the post says, "Talking with a leading member of Sheffield Council a few days ago, and I was told the council are planning to close Sheffield Arena in 3 years' time as part of further cost-cutting campaign. They are looking at building a smaller venue near the town centre at the most 5,000 to 6,000 seats. Apparently the arena is not cost effective anymore due to the number of concerts and other shows lost to the newer Leeds Arena. A smaller venue would attract more artists who don't need to have the 12,000 plus arena we have." So, stress is just a rumour, and it's something that's just been posted on a message board, but that certainly will have implications for the Steelers, won't it, Ad?
Yeah, I think it will. I mean, I find this strange because it wasn't that long ago, was it, that Sheffield Arena had a major refurb internally?
2-3 years ago, yeah.
2-3 years ago, and I remember reading the publicity at the time, and how much money was being invested in bringing the arena up to modern state-of-the-art facility that would sustain its existence for the next 15-20 years. So to hear about potential rumours of the arena being levelled and a new facility popping up closer to Sheffield city centre than where the Sheffield Arena is at the moment, I find it quite strange. I'm a big fan though of purpose-built arenas and facilities just for ice hockey teams. Obviously, we don't have them in this country, generally because there's just not enough money in the sport and to warrant that. But if they, as I think I said earlier when we were talking about it through WhatsApp, what's to say that the same problem wouldn't rear its head again? In that the new facility is built, albeit a bit smaller, and artists and other sort of events want to take some of the time at the new facility, then Sheffield Steelers might have a battle to try and secure the best dates to perform there and play there. So is it just not shifting the problem slightly further along the road, but having fewer seats in a smaller building? So of course it's going to impact on Sheffield Steelers. They won't get their 9,000-10,000 crowds against the Panthers anymore over Christmas. So they're going to lose income from playing out of a smaller facility. But they might not need to play as many games at Sheffield, which I'm sure will be music to the ears of quite a few Sheffield Steelers fans, including your good lady wife, Jono, who doesn't really appreciate watching the Steelers at Sheffield, does she?
No, she does not at all. Andy, anything to add to that?
Not for me.
Okay.
No, not especially.
Okay. We shall move on to the next question. That comes from Jerome Lucy. He says, if we did the double and added the playoffs to the European Continental Cup trophy, would all be forgiven with this team and some of its performances? Ant?
Certainly not the performances. Would all be forgiven with this team. You see, it's really hard because I think it was Paul Adey said, anytime you win a trophy in a season, it's a successful season. And it is. I wouldn't want to stop. I wouldn't want the Panthers to stop winning trophies just to finish second every season. However, the performances in the league this season, which is the one that we pay the vast majority of our funds towards, have been nothing short of abysmal. But then on the flip side, winning the playoffs gives you that last rush at the end of the season. There's so much alcohol drank by the vast majority of us that you kind of forget what's happened previously, and you just have a right good time, and then you've got that bragging rights for the next 6 months. You've finished the season on a high, so yeah, it will be fantastic to win the playoffs. I can't see it happening, but it would be fantastic to win the playoffs. Will it make me forgive this league season? No, because I don't want the vast majority of this team to come back. And if you're forgiving the team, then surely you'd end up re-signing half of them again. No thanks.
Andy?
Well, one thing that I must say is that it looks pretty nailed on now that Cardiff are going to win the league. Now, Cardiff have also won the Challenge Cup. Now, that means that either Sheffield or Belfast, or both, potentially, are going to end up completely trophyless this season because they both can't win the playoffs. Now, I appreciate that our league form hasn't been great, and, you might get the odd ridiculing tweet regarding, the fact that we won in Europe, but we can't win in the league. But realistically, are those 2 points that they've taken off us and mocked us for being European champions? If they don't win the league with them, then it makes no odds to me in that sense. Yes, it would be nice to compete, but at the end of the day, if you compete and you come second, then you might just as well come fifth or eighth or whatever, because you've not won. You don't get a trophy for being a runner-up. And whilst I don't think it would certainly gloss over the season, because the season hasn't been great. But I do think that if we win the playoffs, it would be seen as more of a success. I very much am of the same opinion as Paul Adey, in the sense that, yes, this domestic campaign has been pretty poor, but we shouldn't forget that we've won a trophy and we've done something fantastic this year. And whether we win the playoffs or not, that won't change. And at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, in 10, 15 years' time, if you look back at this season, it will say that Cardiff won the league, Cardiff won the cup, Sheffield or Belfast potentially win the playoffs, Panthers have won in Europe. Well, what has everybody else done this year? Nothing. Regardless of whether they finish higher than us in the league, it makes no odds. So, if we win the playoffs, for me, it will be a fantastic end to a pretty poor season, but still a successful one.
Okay. Adam, you finish us off.
Oh, yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? It really is difficult, because I've got absolutely no love for this year's team whatsoever. As I've said, many other podcasts that I've been on this year, and I can't wait to see most of them, the back of most of them. Hopefully, never see them again. But you can't sort of gloss over the fact that we did win the Continental Cup. And the only issue I've got with that is, yes, it was an amazing achievement, and yeah, the Panthers are the first British ice hockey club to win a European competition, which is fantastic. But I just didn't really feel part of it, because all the games happened overseas. I struggle to feel integrated with what happened. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is still a fantastic achievement, but I think if we were to win the playoffs, as Andy have said, Paul Adey is right. You win a trophy during the course of a season, it should be seen as a successful season. But the league campaign that we've seen, and some of the really limp and abject performances, and there've been many over the course of this season, have really left a sour taste in my mind. But I think that even if we were to win the playoffs, which I think is a real long shot, that hopefully the futures of a lot of these players that we've watched this season has already been decided. And it won't basically be down to their performance over, a home and a away leg of a quarter-final, and then a semi-final and a final that defines a lot of these players, because I think the players have already been defined over the course of the whole season, which does include the Continental Cup. Let's not forget that. But I think fans, certainly the ones that turn up, in great numbers for every home game, they've seen the kind of effort level that these players have put in, and I don't think that they would find for 1 second it was acceptable to re-sign some of these players that have kind of not performed anywhere near the sort of expectation levels that we'd hope for. So yeah, I mean, winning the playoffs would be great, but I still don't think it'll mask the fact that this season by and large has been fairly poor. And certainly the league campaign has left a lot to the imagination.
Okay. One final question that has come into us during the show. It comes from Paul Wheeler at Fourth Line Wing. He says, do you guys see the arrival of Milton Keynes and Guildford changing the boardroom balance of power in the Elite League? Andy?
To be brutally honest, I genuinely don't know. I've not really thought of that at all. I have a feeling, and I might be completely wrong, but I was under the impression that Milton Keynes had a vote anyway.
No, they did at the very formation of the Elite League. I think for 2 or 3 seasons, because there was plans for them to come with them. But I think that was finished.
Right. Okay. Well, ultimately, then yes, there will be a change. Whether that will be consistent across every decision within the league, I doubt it. I would imagine that there will be times when, they will potentially side with one faction in the league, and then on another time they might side with a different one. I do think that the some of the decisions will be different to what we're used to, but I don't think it will change sort of the overall feel of how the league is ran. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. I just think that there will be a change, obviously, because there will be 2 new teams in the league. That's I presume 2 different people voting in whatever it is they have to vote on. So ultimately, there is a fair chance that some of the outcomes will be different, but I don't envisage that it will be, like a momentous shift in sort of power or how the league is run.
Okay, Adam.
I think there might be a little bit more power for the rink-based teams, because both Milton Keynes and Guildford operate out of rinks and not arenas. How that might manifest itself in terms of the decisions over the nitty-gritty of what happens in the league, as Andy was saying, I'm a little bit unsure about. I think, Guildford and Milton Keynes, will they want to start rocking the boat just after they've joined the Elite League by, being quite bold and saying, we're very wedded to this particular view or that particular view? I don't think they will. I think they'll kind of just, feel their way slowly into the Elite League, certainly at board level. So, given that they won't rock the boat, certainly for the first season or 2, in my opinion, I don't think you're going to see that much change, and it will be a case of business as usual. So, the big players around the table will still, exercise their power and their influence over some of the so-called smaller teams that operate in the Elite League.
Okay. And
the thing I'm more interested in is what sort of rivalries they're gonna sort of bring to the Elite League, because these are 2 relative. I mean, I don't go back watching hockey as far as you guys, but they're 2 teams with fan bases and management structures, etc., that have no real sort of grudges or anything to do with the teams currently in the Elite League. So I think from that perspective, yes, they are going to you are going to maybe see a balance of power change slightly, and I'm all for the better, I think.
Okay. Right, a final question that we've had come in from our old mate Chris Lovell. He says, important question on the way home from work on the train, should I eat a Mars bar or a Snickers? Life-changing. So, so very, very quickly, Adam?
Mars bar.
Andy?
Whatever he fancies.
And
Crunchy.
And I will go for packed with peanuts. It has to be a Snickers. So thank you very much for that, Chris. Guys, thank you very much for joining us tonight, and thank you very much to you for sending in the questions. Some great questions sent in this week. We will not be broadcasting an Ask TCW podcast next week because Panthers are playing Manchester at the NIC next Wednesday night. So we'll be back with Ask TCW in 2 weeks. The Weekend Review podcast on Monday night will be going ahead as usual. We'll be looking back at the Scottish triple header as Panthers play Dundee and 2 games in Edinburgh this coming weekend. So all that's left for me to say thank you very much to Andy Haywood.
No worries at all.
Adam Reddish.
Thanks, Jono. Thanks, everybody.
And Antoine Marie-Jeanne.
Cheers, Jono. And if anybody's going up to Scotland, feel free to come and say hello.
Thank you very much to you for listening and sending your questions in. We will speak to you next time on the STCW podcast.